Was thinking about questions from yesterday, and I always try to hope I wasn't too jolly yesterday. Um, Try to give a good answer, and then you walk away. You think, was that helpful? Was that not helpful? So the question on intensity, there's a phrase in Italian, dolce far niente. You saw that in his email, huh? Dolce far niente means sweet doing nothing. Sweet doing nothing, or idleness in English. And so I could say to the person who's very intense, dolce far niente. Don't do anything. Of course, that's impossible. But it is a kind of advanced practice. Think about it. Like, you don't say that to a beginner. You say, "Oh, just do nothing," because the beginner will watch television and eat potato chips. But that's doing something. That's not doing nothing. So, in the beginning, there's tam quam pien, like make a lot of effort, and what ton, and for monks especially, like practice all night and don't sleep too much, don't eat too much. You didn't come here to eat. It's not a restaurant, which serves a purpose, but also serves intensity. So young men, for some reason, like to be intense. And that's why they make soldiers at the age of 18, because they're stupid enough to go out there and get shot or whatever, or they have no choice. So the language of intensity um, is and isn't effective. Depends. So if I say to the person whose character is intense, I say, you should really try harder. That's not going to be very helpful. They might believe it. And to the person who comes to morning meditation every fourth day, but make sure, but always comes to the meal and eats a lot, you say to that person, just relax. I've been like, huh? Well, it's not going to work. So teaching is in context to character. So for me, because I was very, very intense, then when the teachers would say, uh, Toraman, Toraman Kile, I said, okay, I can do that. And I misinterpreted Toraman to mean torture. And then later I was told it means maybe you tell me, like, resist, or how would you translate Toraman? It's not torture, is it? Or he'll go with torture. Okay, so I had it right. So I was intense. Someone said to me, be intense. I said, yeah, I'll be intense. And I had a seizure. So teaching is always, you have to reflect on it and consider it. Is it appropriate to your own conditioning? So you need to have your own confidence and intelligence. And that often comes just through trial and error. So I would pick up on all kind of intense adhitanas until I said I'll never make another adhitana. Um, and that was my avijja, my ignorance, my tendency. So you do have to stay with it. Um, and then other monks, they just chat all afternoon, have a cup of tea, and then but I would say Ploy Wang. It's okay. Another cup of tea, chat all afternoon. So you can see how that could work, couldn't it? You could feed your own delusions with whatever teaching is given. Um, so I could say to the person who's intense, I could give them the opposite, dolce far niente. Just be relaxed. It's like telling a person who worries, don't worry. That's probably the worst thing you could say to them. Of course, they don't want to worry. Of course, but it just is not that easy. My brother used to say that to my mother, don't worry. It's drive my mother crazy. She was worried. So it's a kind of dismissive statement. Don't worry, which isn't kind. Whereas, the awakened mind is, oh, mom, you're really worried, huh? Yeah, yeah, I could see yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah. And you're just empathetic. So then the worry manifests, but it's neither right nor wrong. What are you worried about, mom? Well, this might happen, that might happen. Yeah, 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 but it might not. So you have a discussion about worry. So how about having a discussion about worry? You become the person who is worried becomes more conscious of worry, they become more aware of worry, even if they're not a Buddhist. And that's what we're doing for ourselves and others. So the first step is always the awakened mind. If you don't get there and you're coming from, like if I say to the person who's very, very intense, dolce far niente, then they try to relax. And I'm going to really relax this sitting. I'm going to really, really relax. And obviously it won't work. And so the idea is not just some effort you make, but panya, wisdom. And that comes from awakening and recognizing life is like this. And so the first noble truth, suffering is like this, rather than I have to be more relaxed because I suffer from tension. It's not it's not rocket science. It's not so difficult, but boy, the number of times we forget that to just awaken rather than take it personally. And the thing about this teaching, it's many things, it's beautiful, that on a social level, it describes how we can live as good human beings through the Brahma Viharas, through Dana Sila. Just the idea that you do as much good as you can and do as little harm as you can. And that's a beautiful way to live your life. Really lovely. And then develop skills. This is in the suttas on blessings. Develop skills. Be a good communicator. Teach well. Um, what I've seen with like Amarasiri has helped us. Venerable Amarasiri has helped us redo all our accounting system. Big job. Did a huge job. He's a really brilliant guy, and I can see how happy he is in seeing um, a good quarterly statement. For him, it's a thing of craft, income, whatever that is. I look at it, I said, okay, that's nice. It's numbers. We're not in debt. But for him, it's a craft. It's a skill to see balanced books, to see what is it? Like a spreadsheet. Apparently, spreadsheets are an art. You can do a really good spreadsheet. Marurun. And I look at those things. Oh, that's nice. And then I look at weaving. So there's craft in everything, isn't there? There's craft in skills of business. There's craft in communication. There's craft. So that the Buddha's teaching encourages us to really be skillful, to develop the skills of whatever. And that is rewarding. That's very, very rewarding. But if we don't address the inner suffering that we have, then that will always be predominant. And if we ignore the inner suffering that we have and simply focus too much on the external necessities of life, then that will begin to haunt us and be like a ghost. And so, although conventional life can be very meaningful and it's important to make it meaningful, I think the genius of this Four Noble Truths is that it makes suffering meaningful, isn't it? Because it's not just, oh God, being born, it's a bummer, I'm out of here. I don't want to be born again. No, it's like, ah, if I have the willingness to observe my own suffering, it will bring me to the end of suffering. So he gives, the Buddhist teaching gives meaning to suffering. It's fantastic. It really, really is. So then you have meaning at two levels. You have the meaning in your social life, and then meaning in your inner life. But I think you have to take the meaning in the inner life as primary. Like I've had the good fortune to be involved in the creation of monasteries, which is a lot of physical work and a lot of communal work and so on. And I've kind of grown up as a man in those responsibilities and endeavors. But if I was just out there to create monasteries and I wasn't addressing my own doubts or my own lack of confidence, or I was in competition with other ajahns to get a bigger stupa or, or whatever, then my mind would be very worldly. Look at my sala. My sala is bigger than your sala. Or, I've got 20 bhikkhus. How many have you got? And, monks can be very worldly that way too. And that's just ego. But if I address the inner first, if I make that primary, the end of suffering, then the external becomes a vehicle for the internal. Like if I make being a monk in a kind of Vinaya sense, like really knowing the suttas, Pali, being a Vinaya expert, blah, 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 blah. That's just the external. And I might be an expert on bhikkhu life, and I might be a big bhikkhu or an important bhikkhu, but if I haven't addressed this, then it's just another worldly achievement, but I haven't addressed this. But if I use the bhikkhu life as a vehicle for understanding suffering and the end of suffering, then I can do both. I can live a good bhikkhu life, but I've used it properly for the end of suffering. So lay life is the same. Family life, business life is a vehicle that you're in, and you have responsibilities. You have the chance to create, try to do it well. You have the conflicts of people and family and employees or employer, all the rest of it. But that's your vehicle. That's where you learn. And if you make this part, the dukkha and the end of dukkha, the primary thing, then you'll do both well. Because then you'll see where, what the responsibility is. So people will say, that the bhikkhu life is better for enlightenment. If it's used well, it's a good life. But if it's just used for worldly ends, then it's like any other life. Same with family life. I mean, like I am amazed that people have kids. I'm astounded that someone would take the responsibility to have children. That frightens me. Like if someone was said to, someone asked them, like, did you want kids? Are you kidding? Kids? I get enough problems. I'm so neurotic. How could I have kids? So to have the self-surrender to serve the needs of an infant and try to guide them through life takes a lot of barmi. Takes a lot of barmi. But if the parent isn't paying attention to the inner world and they're not seeing the fears and desires that are manifesting on the child because they haven't recognized the inner delusions, then the child gets warped, gets affected. So it's a huge responsibility. But I think it's beautiful in a sense. It requires tremendous self-surrender. You have to do a lot, give a lot. Or vocation, say, just being like the angel group doing the health initiative in Nan, or organizing their retreats. That requires giving and self-surrender. And within that, it's not easy, like the Nan initiative. And that was fantastic. What, 2,500 patients in one day? That was stunning. I tell people in Ontario about that. Say, wow, really? Don't they have a health system? No, actually, I have a better health system, I think. But but then the giving and the doing means that there's going to be conflict because you're not in your comfort zone. You're taking on a project, and it's so meaningful in that way. But you have to do both, don't you? You use like, okay, you're taking the initiative to do something in non-province. It takes 2 years to organize. There's hassles and there's disagreements and people are not helpful. And you're thinking, well, I'm just trying to be a good person. Come on. But life is that way. And so then you use that as your vehicle for understanding dukkha, then you're fine. Then all of life really is that way. Old age. Um, Old age is just part of the vehicle. Sickness, part of the vehicle. And we do everything we can to remain healthy until we're 150, but it's difficult. And then sickness is a vehicle to learn about not attachment, not suffering. Old age is the same. Motherhood, fatherhood, being an employee. These are all different kinds of vehicles. So like the person that asked the question about not uh, not wanting to be with people that are talkative, afterwards, I'm pretty cheeky. I'm just asking everyone to be silent. And I tell that person, like, but in terms of, I could say to that person, well, just don't discriminate. Love all people equally. Logically, yeah. Emotionally, impossible. And you can see the logic of like the Shin Ming. Don't discriminate a fraction of an inch or you'll suffer. If you get the idea of liking and disliking, the attachment to liking and disliking, which is paticca samuppada, uh, um, um, feeling, craving, attachment. That's what it's talking about. Um, Vedana, tanha, upadana. And so the Shin Ming says, don't discriminate even a little bit. So if this person discriminates about liking that person and disliking that person, they suffer. So I could say to them, well, just love everyone equally. I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. But it just is not that easy. Life is just not that easy. So there is work. But you can take ideals attached to them and feel terrible, or you can take models of thinking and behavior and consideration and say, So I'd often take Lompa Cha as a kind of model of consideration and think, how would Lompa Cha react right now? Probably not how I'm reacting right now. And that would help me see, this is something you have to work on. This is some form of dukkha you have to work on. I could take the model of Lompa Cha and just try to be like him, which would be stupid, and I'd suffer even more. So I really like the Shin Ming. I like that translation. And when I read parts of it, it opens up for me a kind of possibility of grandness and largeness within the smallness of my own attachments and sufferings. And that's what I think high literature can do for us. But it does take contemplation and it does take reflection. And I think a retreat and these high ideas, like the Nibbana Sutta is the highest idea we have in Buddhism. The highest ideal we have in Buddhism. And yet we're trying to concretize it, make it real in our ordinary lives. And then we struggle. And the highness of this philosophy might not come, but we start to get a kind of intuition of what the direction is. And if we keep working at it, then we feel fulfilled both. Like I feel very fulfilled on a worldly level. I don't have kids. My brother did kids. I did monk. Someone had to do monk and someone had to do kids. So I don't feel fulfilled on the family level, but that was not my karma. But as a man, there's fulfillment in that way. But I'm grateful that I worked inside. That was the most important by far. Because when I started, I was a pretty heavy guy, intense, fearful, and depressed. and sometimes happy. But but lots of times the monks didn't want to come near me. It's like this dark cloud comes into the sala. Oh, I think I'll sit over here. It's true. I could clear a room with my depression. But there it was. That's what I had. That's what I had to work with. and, and then someone would tell me to cheer up. I said, oh, shut up. Leave me alone. I just want to be depressed. So that wasn't very helpful. But I worked at it. You just keep working at it, working at it. So I'm really grateful for that. And Lopacha didn't demand that I be happy. He said, you didn't come here to be happy. It's not the program. It's come here to be enlightened and be free from all this. So I'm pretty happy now. So that's work. Let's do some sitting. So, awakening to the way things are. How is it for you now? So, without thinking about this moment, knowing or awakening, being aware, it's like this, and then awaiting. And if you wanted the higher practice, you could say dolce far niente, doing nothing. And that's actually quite difficult. But the awakening, is that doing something? I guess you could say it is. But is it not more just being, knowing, as opposed to becoming, getting, or getting rid of? So can we sustain knowing, being, awareness with the way things are? Relaxed attention, the realization of non-grasping, these kinds of ideas. So let's just sit quietly for half an hour.